This is the point right here that my entire world changed. You know, when you see something, you can't figure out what it is, your mind's trying to rationalize it. That's how the mind works. We measured the next morning when we went out there recon. It was 25 foot from us. So when it stood up, I mean, it was just a mountain over us. It was standing straight up. It wasn't hunched over or anything. And it had a man's profile. This thing had broad, massive shoulders, and it was a very massive creature. But I bet it's probably close to 700 or 800 pounds. It was just massive. My mind's trying to figure out where I'm looking at. I'm trying to say a bear, but I knew it wasn't a bear. It looked like a man covered in long hair.
I'd like to welcome Steve to Bigfoot Crossroads. Steve reached out to me recently and shared quite an event, my friend, quite an event. What made you decide to come forward and tell your story?
Well, that's a good question, and I'll tell you what. To kind of shed some light on this whole thing, and this event happened back in 1975. And so I just told him my age, I reckon. I was a 19-year-old soldier in 1975, stationed at Fort Pope, Louisiana back then. I kept this aside me for all them years, just until recently, a few years ago. What made me come forward with it? And of course, I didn't come out for years and years because of the fact, you don't want to get laughed at or called crazy or something like that,
Right.
That's not just that, but I just recently retired a couple of years ago from a career in law enforcement. As a law enforcement officer, you got a certain stature, and if you don't want to go ahead and walk around with two signs, I believe in Bigfoot and I believe in UFOs or whatever. It's even though a lot do, they keep it to themselves. I did. I didn't want it getting out, and I live out in the woods, way out in the country out here, Southwest Louisiana, and about 4 miles off the highway, and it's only 5 or 6 houses on this little hill right here, and it's about 7 miles out my back door to the woods and the swamps, the next house. I live way out here. I love the woods. One of my hunting partners was my wife's uncle, and we've been married since 1984, shortly after I came out of the military. And her uncle and me were hunting partners. We hunted all through this woods. Hog hunted, deer hunted, squirrel hunted, coon hunted, everything. And one day, and I didn't know this until about that day, he told me, but one day I was thinking about going to a swamp called Anacoca Swamp, which is about 10 miles from here. Pretty rough terrain. It's pretty rough terrain. He was about 73 years old at the time, so here a few years ago. So I figured, I don't know if he can make it or not because of his knees and back and everything at his age. Of course, he was a monster. He could go ahead and go where he wanted to go. But I said, Uncle Lewis, I said, I'd like to see if you like to go hunting in Anacoca Swamp. And he said, no. He said, I'm not going there. And I said, oh, okay. That's too rough for you, sir. He said, no. He said, it ain't too rough. You know me. He said, I could walk through a battlefield backwards. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, but I said, if you don't want to go there, it's not a problem. He said, I haven't been there since the 50s. And I said, the 50s? He said, yeah. And I said, what happened? You got hurt or something? He said, no. He said, that's not something I really talk about. And he said, no one knows about this, not even your wife, which is his niece. And he said, none of the family knew about this. And I said, everybody don't want to talk about it. And I said, well, that got my curiosity up.
Right.
And I said, well, Uncle Lewis, I said, I ain't trying to pressure you to go ahead and come out with it, but what happened? I know you go anywhere. We've hunted all over the place. I said, what? He said, well, you'll be the first one that I'll tell this to, but I appreciate if you don't mix it, to your wife or Karen or anything else. I said, no. I said, and then he clammed up. He said, no, I can't say it. I can't tell you. Well, that really got me. And I said, you know what? I have a feeling he's seen something. Didn't know what it was. But I said, if I'm going to get him to tell his story, guess what I got to do for the first half?
Yeah.
So I went out and came out with mine. And at the end of my story, after I finished it, L man with a rock, and he was almost in tears. He said, I reckon I'm crazy, man. And he told me his story. And that he's seen something very similar. Just 10 miles down the road here in the Unicoke Swamp. And that's what started me right there coming out. He came out with the first time and he told me his story. And that's when I started realizing there are people who know, people we all know, that have seen these creatures have not come out with their story because they're back there scared of the, of the people, laughing at them or whatever. And so that really sparked my coming forward. After that, I had started telling a couple other people about my experience, and ended up talking to a fella that knew the guy who did a podcast, Sasquatch Theory, on YouTube, and I got with him, and he asked me to do the show. I went ahead and did it, and tell my story on that. Well, about 4 months later, he got a hold of me, and he said, "Hey," he said, "you might want to check your messages on that podcast, man." I said, "Well, I haven't, I didn't really figure I'd get any response from it that much, He said, "You better go look." So I went back and looked. In 4 months, it drew 239,000 views.
Wow.
And I said, my goodness. So are the comments, just people coming out and asking me, hey, man, look, your story inspired me to go ahead and come forward with mine. So that really, I think, hey, this is something that, an avenue, kind of a blessing in a way. Now I can use this, holding together in all these years, I can use this to help other people come out with theirs.
Yeah.
And they don't have to go through what I went through. Keeping it quiet to my whole career in law enforcement. And, I've taken, reports from some people who've seen these things, and I never told them my story, of course, but I made sure they understood that I believed every word they were saying, without having to tell them my story, because I wasn't ready to come out yet at the time.
You took reports personally from Bigfoot encounters?
Sure did.
Wow.
Well, there's been lots of sightings around here. That's when I started realizing how many, sightings there were. And after that, of course, what Lewis told me his story, there's been several sightings out in the Sabine, which is not far from here, a few miles away, Sabine River, and all that area there is lots of sightings. As a matter of fact, Lyle Blackman turned out here in Leesville, which is about 35 miles from here, and he did a Bigfoot event over there. And they had their first Bigfoot event in Natchitoches, Louisiana, which is about 45 miles. They expected a couple of hundred people to show up, and there was over 4,000 people went through there. So that really blew everybody away. How many believers there were? There was the mayor of Zerwali, Louisiana, about 50 miles north of here. Zerwali's a small town, small country community, and the mayor contacted the BFRO and had them come out and do an investigation because there were so many sightings of Bigfoot out there, creatures out there from all the farmland. There's a lot of sightings out there here at Cosachi National Forest, which is one of the biggest ones in the state of Louisiana, a little over 600,000 acres. And the military trains out there, we call Peace on Range when I was stationed at Fort Polk. And so, yeah, lots of sightings out in this area. I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people since I came forward mine. Just amazed on the people that you wouldn't think, and that never talked to anyone about it. But once they heard my story, they started coming out. That set me on a mission, to help a lot of people go, which I did in the military. I did that in law enforcement. That was our mandate to help people. Well, guess what? Now I'm able to help people come forward with their stories and encourage them to do so. My story, encounter happened out of the blue. When I was stationed at Fort Polk back in 1975, I had just come down from Fort Benning, Georgia, and attached to the 1st 61st Infantry Battalion over here at Fort Polk back then in 75. And I had a girlfriend that lived on our family farm And it's kind of between Camden, Arkansas and Falk, Arkansas, kind of in between that area there, out in the woods. And her family, her dad and her mama would go ahead and do a lot of that. They grew their own vegetables and such, and they sold them out there towards Camden. Back then, Camden was a small town. I don't know how it is now. That's back, 49 years ago. Ain't been back there since. But any case, I'd go up there on weekends. And weekends, we'd be off, and we'd go ahead and I'd run over there. It's about a 5-hour drive, 4.5 hour drive up to the farm. And I would stay there. And got to know her family really well. Good people. I helped her daddy work the farm, tend the cattle, the hogs, everything. They had a 250-acre farm up there. And a lot of cattle and everything, helping work them and helping build fences and such. I love that kind of stuff. So it was great. Her granny was back in time around 70 years old, very strong Pentecostal gal. I mean, she was hair up in a bun, and I'm very religious, and she was an incredible cook. And that's one reason I went there. A long drive. She could cook some fried chicken. My goodness, I'd make your hair jump up. And I love groceries. I ain't afraid of them. So I'd go up there, and she cooked something back home Friday evening for when I got up there. And this one particular Friday night, got up there, it was in June. It was a very bright night. The moon was so bright, just like daytime. You know how that gets. You can see across the fields. Everything is just real bright, just luminescent. You can see everything in detail, almost like daytime. And so it was a beautiful, beautiful night. We had just finished supper. We were sitting in the den, all was hunkered down there. Me and my girlfriend, her mom and daddy, and then her two brothers. And then, of course, Randy was in the kitchen washing dishes, cleaning up. This is an old farmhouse, wooden farmhouse, been there probably 100 years. The floor's creek when you walk, and everything else it was built up on pylons because they was not far from the river. So evidently it would flood out sometimes when the house stacked up. And about 9:30 that night, we're in the den. Remember the yesterday. I'm here kind of use a visual this time.
Yeah.
At 9:30 at night, her granny's in the kitchen and she strains, and I'm talking about like some good knife in her back. We all just jumped up, and ran in to see her about it. I was the first one in there. Being a soldier, young and everything else, and I was used to running. I went and hit that long hallway, got in that kitchen, and when I made that bend in the kitchen door, here she was sitting on the kitchen floor, and I dang near could have flipped over her. I mean, I was like, oh, but she was sitting on the floor. That old gal was sitting on the floor pointing at the window with the sink. And she was just yelling, I seen it again. Well, first thing in my mind, in my military mind, he saw an intruder. Someone trying to break in, scared the fire out of her. Well, her girlfriend's daddy, he says, everyone arm up. So everyone went up and gun racks on the hall wall. So everyone grabbed shotguns. So went out the back door of the kitchen, out towards the pasture. We got out there, and her two brothers went to the right, and daddy went to the left. We come off there, and the first thing, I'm coming off some steps, and I looked across the pasture. Like I said, that bright moon was just so bright. I could see the cattle on the far end, and they were all hunkered up, and they were cutting up. Well, that's a sign when they do that, of course, that they're just a predator about. So what got my attention was his 3 fruitcake hounds, his hunting dogs. Those things would cut up. I mean, they wasn't scared of nothing, son. And they were full grown. They ready to run, tree everything. And they were under the house, and they were all hunkered down there, whining, scared to death. That's what got my attention. That's what got me thinking, wait a minute. If we're after an intruder, it's one big feller, one big bad feller. And so I went ahead and I asked her dad, I said, hey, what about the dogs? He said, don't worry about that. Just stay close behind me. I thought it was an intruder. Boy, was I in for a shock. I base my life on being level-headed and everything. If I can't see it, it ain't real. That's what I always thought. That changed here tonight. We usually walking towards this corner post. We had just built a fence, divider fence, that divided the pasture from the 50-acre swamp. He didn't want his cattle going in that swamp. It was pretty bad inside, full of briars, thickets, and all kinds of stuff. So we're approaching it. We caught a stench, pretty rough. Felt like something dead mixed with matted piss. I mean, he said it smelled pretty rough. And if we got close to that, I was thinking to say something about that. We jumped up. Something jumped up in that thicket, maybe about 15 foot in front of that, in that swamp. There's a big old briar thicket inside there. It was turning and burning. I mean, we couldn't see it, couldn't make it out because it was so thick inside there. But it was turning and burning. I mean, breaking limbs, just stomping leaves. I mean, it was just like a 2,000-pound rhino just turning in circles. And then all of a sudden, it jumped fence into the pasture. This is the point right here that my entire world changed. And I'm looking at this thing, and when you see something, you can't figure out what it is. Your mind's trying to rationalize it. That's how the mind works. That's about 25 foot from us. We're not talking about 100 yards away. We measured the next morning when we went out there recon. It was 25 foot from us. So when it stood up, it was a month. I mean, it was just a mountain over us. It was slanted to us now. So when it stood up, it was facing to our right. So we saw its right profile, and it stood up. It had long arms, and like I said, in that bright moon, I could see everything. Big old hands. Hands were below its knees. It was standing straight up. It wasn't hunched over or anything, but it had very broad shoulders, and it had a man's profile, not a bear. Bear's got a snout. It's very, you look at a bear's profile, it's got a snout. A bear's got slope shoulders. This thing had broad, massive shoulders, and it was a very massive creature. But I bet it's probably close to 700 or 800 pounds.
Wow.
And loose. It was just massive. My mind's trying to figure out where I'm looking at. I'm trying to say a bear, but I knew it wasn't a bear. No, not just the fact that bears in Arkansas don't get no taller than maybe 5 foot, standing on 2 feet. But this thing was 8 foot, maybe 700, 800 pounds. It looked like a man covered in long hair. And then all of a sudden it just bolted. And it took off like a rocket. It ran away from us. Didn't try to attack us. It ran like a track star. It never fell to all fours. It ran like a track star. I mean, arms pumping, everything on 2 feet. And I definitely, it wasn't a bear. Because I've seen bears. Grizzlies, I've seen black bears, all kind of bears. And the bears can walk like a man, easily. But they cannot run like a man. They have to fall to all fours to run because their hip and leg structure won't allow them to run.
Right.
On 2 feet. So this thing ran like a track star across the whole pasture. It ran like you or me would run across the pasture. Well, they had to crash to the cattle gate. And when it crashed that cattle gate, boy, it saw the factor going through it. And, it just shattered that cattle gate. And at that point, that's when we figured we wasn't pursuing it any further. And I had a partner of mine I was telling us still, he said, well, you should cattle gate, made of wood, balsa wood or something like that. We built that thing out of 2x6s, oak 2x6s. If you never tried to go ahead and break an oak 2x6, number one, they're heavy as I'll get out. Number two, you really can do it. It can happen, son. Especially a few of them there. And I remember a Spring Fork Junction over there we had tied in. And it shattered them. It shattered. It splintered those things. Now, we didn't pursue it until the next morning and did a recon. Of course, went out there and we checked everything. Inspected everything. And that's when we really saw the damage it did. But after it ran from that, after it shattered that cattle gate, it saw a roar I ain't never heard in my life. Now, I've been down here in the woods since 1986. We came out here and moved out here. And that's a lot of years. I've heard everything. Growl and roar, everything out here. And I ain't never heard nothing like that. That was most worth, scariest and worst roar, loudest roar I've ever heard, in my life. And so once it did that, of course, then there come our two brothers on the other side, pastor in the house, and they said, "Do you hear that? Did you guys hear that?" I said, "So we seen this thing." What? Yeah. Well, her daddy was about ready to have a heart attack. He was ready. Like he sat down, he didn't know what I don't do. He said, this thing's coming around every once in a while. He said, I don't know what to do to protect my family. And I said, this is coming around every once in a while. Well, it made sense why Granny said she didn't see it again, which pointed at the window.
Yeah.
I added it up, and I said, why wouldn't you tell me what we was going after? And he said, would you come out the house if I told you?
He's got a point there.
Yeah, I said, man. So I said, good God. I said, what is it? He said, I don't know. I have no idea. But it's coming around here every once in a while. Now, their farm was, that farmhouse is probably about a mile from the nearest house. So they're isolated out there. And the first thing I did, I said, buddy, as you ever decide to go ahead and think about contacting wildlife and fisheries or sheriff's department or something? He was, oh no, we can't do that. And I said, why not? I said, at least they can do an investigation. He said, they laughed. He said, number two, he said, we can't afford to go ahead and do that because we sell our products, our vegetables and everything over there and outside of Camden. I said, we can't run our business. People would laugh at us and think we're crazy. He said, no, I don't want that done. I said, we're going to keep it to ourselves. And he said, I ask you if you would do the same when you go back to Fort Polk. Please don't talk about this. For that time, where things kind of calmed down, we got inside there and everyone was just kind of hunkered up. I asked her, I said, ma'am, I said, if you don't mind. And I said, I was curious how its face looked. And she said, it looked like a huge man's face, but it wasn't any man. And that sent chills to me when she said that. And he said, I think it's because he was a Pentecostal and, they don't understand, they don't believe anything other than what we see in their eyes. Well, she said it had red glowing eyes. Anyway, she said it's come out a few times. It looks in the window. Never tried to break in the house. And the only thing it ever broke or destroyed was, of course, that cattle gate that night. But prior to that, never destroyed anything they knew of. And never tried to, hurt her or anything. We just, surmised that her cooking probably went ahead and brought it in as curiosity or such.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it would come around every once in a while. In any case, we stayed up all that long, society drinking coffee all that long. No one was asleep that night. Of course, we found the footprints and everything. We measured those at around 17.5 inches in length. About 4.5 inches wide, 5 inches wide. They were pretty big feet. I mean, that blew me away. It shined on 2x6s, ripped the barbed wire. And we found chunks of air and everything in that barbed wire. Now, that wasn't even a thought back then. Of course, we didn't have cell phones, didn't exist back then, our computers. So, we went ahead and seen that. I wish I grabbed a lot of that hair, had kept it as a keepsake, but didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
In that time frame, that day. But anyway, we found that, went ahead, noticed that about 20 foot from to the right of that cattle gate was the corner post of the pasture. And it was made out of a cut down telephone pole. And it was sunk about 5 foot deep in the ground. And of course, it was laid over. The pressure that was forced that creature going through that cattle gate and just going through it like it did, like a D9 dozer, just pulled that corner post over. It didn't break it. We dug it up, man. It was laid over.
Wow.
It really laid it over. That's some force.
Yeah.
And, well, that ain't nothing. Left of it, about 25 foot, was the squeeze chute for the cattle. And that was all bowed up. It had bent them bars. I mean, just gained them all up from the force we're going through. Maybe ruined it. So we had seen the force of this thing and the power it had. Of course, it went on through a thaw-reef wire. Fit it. We didn't go any further than that. So after that, went back to the post. They asked me to keep my mouth shut, and I did. I honored it. Never talked about it to anybody. And kept my mouth shut and just put it in the back of my mind. And of course, the weekends I went back after that, never seen it again.
Huh.
Did they see it during the week when I wasn't there? I don't know. I didn't ask, and they sure didn't tell me. That was their business. But the weekends I was there after that, didn't see it. And we didn't even talk about it. We didn't even bring it up. In 76, I got orders TCS to overseas in Europe. And so I went overseas, and that was the last of it. We broke up, her and me, and, not getting mad at each other. I told her, I said, well, I'll be gone for a few years overseas. So I said, let's go ahead and end it. We did. We stayed friends, and that was it. Finally came back from overseas. One, I went ahead and IETF out of the military and got married in before. My wife here, married to now. And, like I said, everything kept inside me all the years, my whole career. Then, I never told my kids, never told my wife or anything.
Yeah.
But fine, when I told them, about it, they were pretty interested. Of course, they were open-minded. Both my boys was open-minded. One plays in the band. He lives out in Nashville, and the other one, he's a warden over a prison out here in Louisiana. So, they're both professionals, but they have open minds. They both believe, there's a lot of things going on in this world that, we don't know. And my wife, she halfway believes it. She says he has a hard time understanding this thing, but she heard it from her uncle too, his story. And she said, well, there's obviously something out here, but she never seen one before. She's one kind of seeing is believing. Well, that's how I was. And trust me, seeing was believing. I've not seen one since. Now, people ask me all the time. A matter of fact, I had done one podcast for some fellers, and one of the guys had asked me, there was two fellers on that one, commentators, and they'd asked me, well, it's 7 miles at your back door to the woods. Well, I mean, you can go out there, if you wanted to, you can sit there and say, you see Bigfoot all the time, and people would believe you, because the fact of the matter is, we're out in the woods. I said, yeah, I could do that, but that would ruin my credibility. It would ruin everything. I'm not going to do that. I've never seen one out here in these woods. I've hung all these woods. I've never seen one. So I'm not going to tell you I saw something I didn't.
Yeah.
What I seen, and I know what I seen every time I would leave my house, go in the woods. Fun. It's on my mind. I did have an experience while I was in the military. Didn't see it. We heard it. This one we heard. And right before I went to Europe and TCS over there. But like I was telling you, we trained over in what's called Tucson Ridge out in Avon. That's the national forest out there. So we lay out in the woods. I was at the 61st Infantry Battalion. First and foremost, they had seen something. Just any daytime, something huge crossing in front of you, in front of all those tanks and APCs.
Huh. And
all of the soldiers saw it, including the BC battalion commander. Well, he went ahead. We saw it. It was like I said, close 10 foot tall, but they said covered in hair. And it ran like a man across the road, and it was running at a high rate of speed that no man can run. So the BC called the division headquarters, which was General Haldane at the time, was post commander for Polk. And he reported him, of course, and at that point, shut down Fort Polk, and not shut it down as far as working, but he went ahead and shut it down to the public. Back in those days, back in after Vietnam was over and everything, and it was peacetime, what happened was the military bases would go ahead and open up to the public. They can go on there. A lot of the people would go across Fort Polk, the civilians, because it would tie in, it would be a shortcut, like a bypass road going through Fort Polk from South Fort, North Fort, coming out Highway 28 was a bypass kind of going to Alexandria. So it saved them a lot of miles going through Leesville. So they used that. He didn't set it down. For that week, it was only a military personnel and authorized civilian personnel that were allowed on post that week. All the battalions were put on alert, and we were all sent out there to go ahead and look for this creature. The secret top thing, we supposed to keep hush hush. And we all went out there. We didn't see anything. We broke up in teams, 4 or 5 man teams, spread out all through the woods, and it's a big back area over there to go through. We was going through there. We heard something crash through the woods. It's like a truck hitting a tree. So we ran through the woods, going looking, and we found a deuce and a half, which was a military transport vehicle on the side, smashed. We didn't see what did it. We just heard it when it happened. So we went through there. Of course, we had to take pictures and everything else of that. And we said report back, turning everything we went ahead and see. And so went ahead, we go back, and they went ahead and said, okay. We carried on, didn't see anything else. We come back. Of course, everyone pulled together across Highway 10 from Fort Polk is our honorary field over there. We went over there, and of course, there how they had a meeting, told everyone. He said, okay, look, this is, that's our type of thing. No one talks about this. All the places below Goat Hill, with Billy Goat Hills, where we were parked at. I was going towards Leesville. All the bars were over there. Were off limits. We couldn't go there because they didn't want us talking about it. Couldn't go there for a while.
Did you have any orders or instructions in case you did see it?
No, we were told to go ahead and just radio back if we did anything at all. Not to regress it, not to go ahead and try to stop it or anything. We didn't have any weapons. We had no weapons at all. Well, we had M16s, but they had blank adapters on them. If you don't know what a blank adapter is, a blank adapter is what we use in training. And what it is, it goes on the end of your barrel on your flash suppressor. But you have blanks. Blanks aren't good against a person, let alone a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That's all you had. You had that, you had your radio, and that was it. And of course, the military cameras they gave you. And then you had to go and turn that in. We turned all that in. We did hear us through the grapevine. Don't know how true it is. Heard us from the military grapevine. So soldier to soldier. It wasn't from Mike. It was from, soldier to soldier. That it was captured. Well, I have no verification of that, so I'm not going to say it was or wasn't. Because military grapevine was kind of like, hey, whatever, you can believe it. Sometimes it's a team. So,
right.
But don't know. Evidently, there were some hunters that seen it. And also, but the thing about it is once that, turn the page up a little bit, once Lyle had that Bigfoot thing over here, conference over here in Leesville, here a couple of years ago, some of the folks from Kisatchie National Forest live out in that area, had come up, was there, talking about, there's lots of sightings out in the Kisatchie area, and found that out too. I found out there was several sightings out there at Kisatchie. And so, it's nothing. That's a big area right there. Lots of swamp, woods. I mean, anything can live out there. You want to see how big Kisatchie National Forest is. Go ahead, start in Leesville on Highway 20 and hit Highway 28, and you drive all the way northeast until you get Alexandria. All the woods out there you're going to go through are going to be after National Forest every day. And it's literally almost 50 miles from Leesville to Alexandria.
Jeez,
that's a lot of swamping areas out there. And it says so. Yeah, I mean it's lots of sightings out in that area. There have been lots of sightings out in the Sabine, and of course, like I say, Anacoca. So Louisiana's full, man. Down south Louisiana, of course, the big stories are over there. Honey Island Swamp and all them areas there. They see these creatures all the time. So out in Atchafalaya, and literally out in Atchafalaya Basin out there, we call it the 18-mile bridge. And even off the Ute going to the Baton Rouge. And on I-10. Well, the 18-mile bridge, that goes across Atchafalaya. I mean, Atchafalaya Basin, it goes on for miles and miles and miles and miles. And you have folks living out there. I'm talking about like they was back in the 1800s. Yeah. I mean, even the sheriff's office know back there. So I mean, there's no telling what's out in that area. One night I was actually it was not right. It was right at dusk, and I was out hunting. I hunt behind the house a lot of times. back there a couple 100 yards. And I was sitting on my stand, and I heard something out in the distance, like that. I didn't know what it was. I never heard that before. It wasn't a hoot owl. It was just, I blew it off. And, I didn't see anything. Just like, well, it's almost time to go anyway. So I went ahead and come off the stand, come back to the house. And my wife had went ahead and she told me, she was, I heard something behind the house out in the woods. And she said it was whooping like I never heard that before. And I said, you heard that too? I said, I heard it on my stand. And she said, yeah, I heard it. So, but she didn't know what. I said, well, of course, didn't see anything. What was it? Don't know. I'm not going to say it was a Bigfoot. I don't know what it was, but you never know.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things, like you're saying, once you know that they're out there, I mean, it stays in your mind forever.
It does. Oh, well, it's been 50 years for me, since I seen that one in Arkansas. And here I was 19-year-old soldier. Now I'm going on 68. And I ain't forgot that stayed in my mind like, well, the traumatic experiences do that. You remember details. I know when I'm working in law enforcement and I'll talk to people who rape victims, whatever. And, you ask them questions, they can tell you detail. I mean, boom, 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 because it's a traumatic experience. It's embedded in your brain, burnt in your brain. So you remember the details. And, I remember that so well. And it's like, wow, what? Yeah, these things are real. I mean, what else can you call them but a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you can call it clown with hair, whatever, but they're out there. I believe they're very, very intelligent. I do believe that. I think they have a sense of human intel. They know how to avoid trail cams. I believe that 100%. They can recognize a trail cam. Evidently. The red eyes thing, this is my concept on this. Okay. I can be wrong. I'm just giving you my concept on it because of what I've researched and this and that. A few years ago, I was watching the Discovery Channel on TV. And they deep sea exploration and all that kind of thing. And my wife and me were watching it. And they had they're going down these little mini subs about 10,000 feet deep in the ocean, looking for these different, fish and this and that. Well, the sub going, of course, the water is pitch black dark down there. And subs looking and they see these red beams. Comes up on the closer end, and that lights of the subs show the fish. And they're just fish. And they're down there. I guess they developed a sense of IR, infrared, where they can see in the darkness, sense food, shelter, what have you. And that the red beams, their eyes were glowing red, and that red beams going out from the darkness. So the commentator says, these creatures developed this over years. And he said, who's to say that if sea-based creatures can develop this, technology or for adaptation to seeing in darkness with these red eyes, that land-based creatures couldn't. So that kind of went back to what Clayton said about, red eyes like backing taillights. That could be these creatures, IR, natural IR, be able to see in the darkness.
Yeah. And
so I imagine, they have a sense of intel. They know animals have a sense. They know. Do you deer hunt at all? Do you deer hunt or squirrel hunt?
Oh, yeah. I grew up with outdoorsmen, man.
Okay. Well, you remember that's a home. So, yeah, definitely. So, what I'm talking about? A deer, call it their defensive mechanisms is to go ahead and freeze rain. Stand still. Just freeze. And deer can stand in the wood line, you wouldn't see them, because they meld into the woods, into their surroundings. That's in the military. That's what we're taught is actual camouflage. Being able to, just go ahead and oppose your form, go ahead and meld into the surroundings and everything. And that's exactly what animals do. Squirrels, same way. Squirrel hunting, look up there in the tree. You see a bump on a limb, it can be a pine knot. You don't know what it is. It's just sitting there, not moving at all. Watch it for a while. Also, that tail wag, it's a squirrel. Animals can freeze frame. It's one of their defense features they have. And it stands still, you won't miss them because humans, we attack. That's how we see. And we don't see movement. We can't tell it's there. And so my personal belief on it, these creatures see us before we see them. They see us. Lots of people who don't believe these things exist have been seen by a Bigfoot. That's what I believe. So these things are out there in the woods, and they know when to come out. They know not when to come out. I imagine they have that sixth sense that animals have to detect danger, whatever. And you couple that sixth sense, that speed and agility of a bobcat or a deer with a sense of human intel, and you have the perfect creature.
Yeah.
That's why he avoids people so easily and so hard to find. Because it's not just a dumb animal. It's just something that really, I'm not going to say as smart as we are, but I'm going to say has a sense of intel to pretty much put it on the level playing field. That's my personal aspect. Like I said, I could be 100% wrong. I'm just saying that I believe, but my whole life's been affected by this over the last 50 years. And, I always think about it. I always know, hey, what we're taught to believe isn't always true. And there's things out there that we don't understand. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. You ask questions if you want.
I'm just sitting here enjoying the story, man. That's quite an experience.
Well, it's something that I can't count how many times after that happened, and I went back to post and everything and all that, that I wanted to tell somebody, but never. These things are out there. The Germans believed in that kind of thing when I was over in Germany, stationed over there. They told us about these creatures that they'd seen up there, in the mountains and everything. And all the guys I was with, the troops I was with, they laugh. Oh, yeah. And I'd laugh along with them. I didn't want to think, tell my story back then. So I was, rolled over them, but they've been seen around a lot of military posts by friends of mine who are stationed in Fort Drum, New York, that has seen them up there. Fort Bruce, Washington. Fort Tarson, Colorado. And there's been lots of sightings, onto there of these things. But
I'm kind of curious about your opinion on this. You had that experience in the military and everything, and like you just said, other military servicemen that have seen them. Why do they want to keep them a secret?
When it comes to the government, it's hard. There's hard to figure out why. There's so much level of frequency in the government. It staggers the mind to understand how much secrecy. When I was in the military, my goodness, you had, we had top secret clearances in my MOS when I was in the military. And, we got to deal with a lot of crypto and special ops and that kind of stuff. And it's strange how it works, but every level of clearance, you're a level 6 and more than the guy who had a level 5, but you can't tell him what you know. The guy on level 7 knows more than what you know, but he can't tell you what he knows. So it's just that one extra level. It's amazing what you learn. And so there was a incident that happened to me when I was stationed here at Fort Polk that I don't really talk about this much, but it's nothing to do with Bigfoot, but it was something that we were sent. There was 5 that was sent from different posts up to Fort Bliss, Texas. And Fort Bliss, Texas is over there on the west end of Texas, and it ties into, of course, New Mexico and all that. We were sent there, and we were given the coordinates. We had five clear roads, and we had to follow a chase vehicle. Chase vehicle was 2 civilian. They were in civilian clothes. We don't know if they were CID, CIA, whatever. We don't have no idea. We had to follow them. That was the order. We went as the crows flies about 6.5 hours north to the Mexican mountains. We were by our estimation, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, but it was not too far from Santa Fe, New Mexico, that area there. We had gotten there. It was a white stop, in a little guard hut right there. And we would come out, and he was a second lieutenant. That was very unusual. You never saw brass working as guard ever. You always had, EMs or NCO, something like that, but you never had a lieutenant or captain or something like that. Second lieutenant comes out there, guides us over first vehicle to the post by stop, almost up against it. Next one, bumper to bumper, bumper to bumper. We were ordered out of vehicles, and we had to go on the other side of the guard shack, face the opposite direction, and stand at parade rest. And we were ordered around, about base back around from there. So we're standing there sweating and, just uncomfortable. I just happened to go ahead and glance back real quick, and then glance back, and the vehicles, I looked down in a hole. That's all I've seen was as if it was an elevator device that lowered the vehicles down to some kind of a maintenance facility or something. I don't know what it was. But I, of course, will turn back around. It's going to glance and come back around again. Look back until the orders to attention and about face back vehicles. They were all topside again. They were opposite direction, unloaded, empty. Ordered back in the vehicles again, followed chase people back to Fort Bliss, got back to Fort Bliss, ordered out of the vehicles into a building where we were debriefed. Had a full bird colonel inside there, and we had to sign all kind of documents saying that, we would never talk about this. It's not going to, and so we had to do all that. The frequency, what was it? There's these things all over the country. There are so many different ports and everything else underground. It's unbelievable. But anyway, so my point being secrecy is so crazy. Why would they want to hide it? Why don't they want to talk about these creatures? Probably the same reason they don't want to talk about aliens, or UFOs, this and that and everything else. To me, maybe because of the species has that intelligence. They don't think that we need to know about it. Yeah. Maybe that's what they want to do. They want to capitalize on it themselves. I don't know. But secrecy of it is, they just all want to talk about it. I wish I had an answer. I wish I could say one way or the other. All I can do is speculate, and that's all I can do. They just don't want people to know about these creatures because, they don't want people to ask questions. They want to, go ahead and make people think, oh, these things don't exist. This is, it's like the UFO thing. Back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, the 50s, and they're on back, talking about UFOs, they thought you were crazy. But in 2007, 2008, when the TikTok video showed, and all of a sudden they popped out with this, and people started saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe these things are real. I think there's a point in time coming, maybe in the future, where government might say, okay, look, maybe it's time to go ahead and bust the cap off on this one too. And tell people, okay, these things are real. These things exist. When one fella asked me one time, he said, why wouldn't they tell us about alien species out there? They make us think we're all alone and everything. And all of a sudden, now they're starting to come out with it. I said, well, who knows? But my estimation would be maybe if there's a violent species or maybe a aggressive species out there, alien, that wants to destroy this world, they have they're millions of years advanced from us. They have technology and weapons that our greatest scientists won't even dream of for the next 10,000 years. And they can wipe us out in a squirrel's heartbeat. So maybe they don't want to do that because they cause all of a sudden a mean panic. And my estimation on that is that the world is based on religion. Religion is the glue that holds humanity together. It is our belief in God, and belief in, of course, I believe in God. I believe, but I'm saying is that is what the glue that holds this whole world together and keeps this world from getting in utter chaos. Because you take away belief in God, you take away the religion, and you have utter chaos. All of a sudden now we're all by ourselves. and we feel, how alone we really truly are and how defensive we are. And so, it would be complete chaos if people, thought, because your basic Christian does not believe in alien life forms. They believe that, what we're seeing is demons, like Danny did, that Bigfoot in Arkansas. They think they're demons. So we don't understand it. That's how we think. If we don't understand it, it's got to be evil. That's not necessarily true. But that's what our mindset is on. And so if it caused they said, okay, look, we got aliens out here going to come out here and attack this world, blow this world up or whatever, and use y'all for food. Well, what's it waiting? And they say, okay, well, great. Well, tomorrow morning when I wake up, I'll think about it. No, you're going to go ahead and trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just know where they exist, but I can't tell you what they are or where they're from. And, I don't know. Well, what do you think? You think they're extraterrestrial or what's your...
That's the $1 million question, ain't it? Here's what I think. Now, again, just my opinion, but like the one you saw, for instance, obviously it was much larger than we are, unlike anything else you had seen. But like you said, it had a man's profile. It stood on 2 legs. It had 2 arms. It had hands. It had fingers. It was covered in hair. And that sounds like something that's from this planet. There's a lot of other things that have those same attributes. And it would really surprise me if something from outer space, some foreign planet somewhere in, a different galaxy or something from a different dimension happen to have the same physical attributes as things that live on this planet.
That's true. And so I agree with you on that. I kind of believe they're from here too. I think they're just what they are. Maybe they're missing link, they used to call years ago between, man and, I don't know, an animal that they've over the years adapted. They hide underground. They do this and that. I don't know,
They don't seem to fit in the boxes that we've come up with so far.
No, they don't. And well, again, when you go back to the fact, I personally believe they're part human, part animal. When you come back understanding, part animal, their speed, their agility, and part human, having that human intel. Because the animals really don't have a reason. Humans do. So if you have a creature like this that has the speed and agility of an animal, yet in the survival instinct of an animal, in the survival capabilities and camel capabilities of an animal, yet has the sense of human intel, you have the perfect creature. And you have a creature that literally can outsmart a human because they can, freeze frame or delve into the wood line where you wouldn't even know they're there and walk right by them. Yet, as big as they are, have the intel to understand how to avoid trail cams and such. Well, how come we don't see them anywhere? Well, they've probably seen you more than likely before you'll see them because they won't have to hide in the woods. You don't, and you'll have to watch. They're a perfect, predator. They know how to go ahead and watch. They were aggressive. I believe that'd be a lot of dead human beings. So I don't think they're aggressive. That night we seen that one there. Now I had a 12 gauge and Bobby, my girlfriend's daddy, had a 410. If there's something like that big, that's pop guns. They can do a thing. We never fired a shot. It ran away from us. Thank God it did. Now if it did come and try to attack us, I'd unload that 12. I promise you I would have, and reload it again. But it didn't go ahead and try to regress. It ran away from us. They're not aggressive. And that's a good thing. What we saw was big enough to go ahead and do some serious damage if it wanted to, and it ran away from us. That's a big creature. People can't understand what 8 foot is.
Yeah. It's big. It's big.
8 foot is big. And you're talking about 600, 700, 800 pounds. That's a beast right there, son.
You may not want to see one again, but I'm glad you decided to come forward and start sharing your story because it's quite a story, man. Well,
here's the thing. And that's why I want to kind of throw this in the mix real fast as we could. is being in prior military and law enforcement. I just want to encourage other people, all your listeners, whatever, other people that's in the background, military, law enforcement, hey, you got an encounter, come forward, because people need to hear it, and it's going to help you tremendously. I know after keeping this thing inside me for almost 50 years, it wasn't healthy. It wasn't good. But once I let this out, I can't tell you the therapy it's been for me. And so I encourage everybody who has an encounter, I don't care, if it's about Bigfoot or dogland or UFOs, whatever it may be, and you've been keeping it up for years inside, let it out. People need to hear it. People are becoming more open-minded now and acceptable to these things. And so it's definitely something that you want to do.
Steve, thanks for coming on and talking to me and sharing your story and some of your insights. I thoroughly enjoyed it, man.
Well, I sure appreciate your time, and thank you for having me, partner.
Absolutely.